Readers, welcome back to my channel, Books, Ink, and Paper. I'm Lori, and I'm happy that you're here, or happy that you have just joined me if you're new. I hope you'll subscribe by hitting the subscribe button as well as the bell at the top of the screen to notify you when a new video is posted. I'm wrapping up the year and really getting ready for 2023. But I had promised in a previous video that I would do a Book of the Month haul separately and talk about the books that I got from Book of the Month in the year of 2022. I've talked about a couple of them in that video, but I did want to really just kind of share with you what I hauled, what I read, and kind of what's on my radar for 2023. So I've been a subscriber for with Book of the Month for a couple of years now, and I love the flexibility of it, that it allows me to skip a book if I don't want one that month, if there's nothing that really interests me. And it also allows me to read some authors new, debut authors, sometimes early releases, so I get a book before other people get it, and they're usually pretty interesting. They're not as mainstream maybe as some of the other books that you see, but often they become mainstream after they've been a Book of the Month selection. So some of these authors are old favorites that I have read before. Some of them are new to me, and a variety of genres, which I like as well. So there's usually a book from each genre, or almost each genre each month. So I like that as well. Let's get started with the book that I chose in January. This was after I had read a book called The Lions of Fifth Avenue, which I talk about as being one of my favorites of 2022. It was a January read for me, and this was a January pick. So because I was reading The Lions of Fifth Avenue, I chose The Magnolia Palace by Fiona Davis. This one is also a dual timeline like The Lions of Fifth Avenue, and I think a lot of her books, it features two different women in New York, two different scenarios or situations, but maybe the same connectedness to place. I don't know if all of hers are like this, but that is exactly how The Lions of Fifth Avenue was. And that's exactly how this is billed. So it follows a character named Lillian Carter, she's in a limbo situation, and she ends up taking a job at the Frick Mansion. And some things happen there to her that I don't want to know a whole lot about. And then almost 50 years later, a model named Veronica Weber ends up connected to the Frick Mansion, which is now a museum. And she finds some notes and some things that help her to understand what happened to this other woman, Lillian, in the past. So that sounds wonderful to me. And this is a beautiful cover. I mean, it's just gorgeous. So I would like to read this sooner than later. And it would be kind of fun to read another Fiona Davis in January. So we'll see if that's possible to do. So in February, I skipped my box. So I got nothing in February of 2022. And then in March, I got the Book of Cold Cases by Simone St. James. I have lent that since to my daughter to read. But Simone St. James is a favorite author of mine. I've read many of her novels. And this one was particularly exciting to me because it featured a woman who, they're usually dual timelines too, but they're not always, you don't always have the character from the first timeline in the current sort of timeline that you're reading about. But in this case, you did. It follows a woman who's accused of murdering a man. And fast forward, she's never been convicted. She's kind of isolated as a result of being accused of murder, even though she wasn't, convicted for it. But there's a woman who runs not a podcast, but a true crime website. And she's investigating this murder. And so her name is Shay, and she reaches out to this woman whose name is Beth Greer and says, "Can I interview you about what happened?" And she's never talked to anyone about it. She's never interviewed anyone before. And she agrees to speak to Shay. It is a very interesting relationship that develops, and some interesting kind of spooky things happen. And I really, really enjoyed it. I gave it 4 stars, and I do recommend it. I skipped April, and then went to May. In May, I hauled The Hacienda by Isabel Canas, who is a new author to me, and I think this is her debut. It is, and I'll tell you why I know that in a minute. But so I'm in the middle of reading this one. I'm not quite halfway through. It's a gothic horror novel. It's really interesting. It follows a woman whose name is, you would think I'd know, Beatrice, who's married to Don Rodolfo. After she's married for financial reasons, not necessarily for love, Don leaves her in this home of his family home, and he's taking care of business. And she's trying to acclimate herself to the home and the people that care for the home and Don's sister. And some really creepy, horrific things start happening around her. And she's starting to get really scared, and she wants help. She wants somebody to help her and understand what's happening in this house. I really like it so far. I really wanted to finish it by the end of the year. And the reason I remember that this is a debut was because I really wanted to finish the Book of the Month Club challenge for this year. And I was one book short, and this was it. But I was sick and I really just couldn't focus very well. But I want to get to the end of this and see what happens to Beatrice. And I really liked it. The other one, which I think is wrapped up in the tree somewhere, was Take My Hand by Dolan Perkins Valdez. I did finish this. I talk about it in another video about my 2022 favorites. It was indeed a favorite of mine. It was so well done. It was so heart-wrenching. It followed a nurse who was working in a clinic to help young girls to prevent pregnancy and to kind of make sure to keep their reproductive health in order. And some things happen that are just very intense, and she is torn between, what she believes to be the right thing to do for her patients and what the clinic administrator believes is the right thing to do for her patients. It's a difficult read. It's pre-Roe v. Wade, but it does touch on that, and it does have a bit of a dual timeline, so you can kind of see what happened after all of this took place in the years, after that, and what happens in this nurse's life as a result of what choices she made. I can't say enough about it. It was really one of my standouts for 2022. In June, I hauled Things We Do in the Dark by Jennifer Hillier. I think this is my second Jennifer Hillier read, maybe my third. I read Jar of Hearts, I know, and it was okay. Things We Do in the Dark stood out to me a little bit. I enjoyed it. I would say I enjoyed it more than Jar of Hearts. It follows a woman who wakes up to discover her husband is dead in the bathtub, and she's holding a bloody knife, and someone comes in and finds her, and she's accused of murdering her husband. But she doesn't think she did that. But her name is Paris Peralta, but her real name is not Paris Peralta. So she's kind of running from some things that happened in her past as well. It's really well done. It's well paced. It had a bit of a shocking ending to me. Not shocking, but it was a bit of a surprise ending for me too. And I did enjoy it. I'm glad that I got it because I was kind of on the fence about it, but the synopsis really intrigued me, and I indeed was very satisfied by it. In July, I got 3 books. So if I skipped a couple, I made up for it in July. I got The It Girl by Ruth Ware, which I did read, and I did talk about that in another video. Ruth Ware is a favorite author of mine. It was not my favorite Ruth Ware for sure, but it was solid. It was good. It followed a woman who has a friends group from the past in college, and one of their friends is killed, and a man is accused of having killed her and is incarcerated, but then he dies in prison, and there's still some speculation that maybe he wasn't the murderer. So she's kind of reunited with some of those friends, and with that, she's kind of brought back to that time, and she's trying to figure out what happened. So it was good. It wasn't like a 5-star read for me, but it was good. And then The House Across the Lake by Riley Sager, another favorite author of mine. I think I've read everything Riley Sager's ever written. This one had a weird turn to it, had a weird plot, but it also follows a woman whose husband has died, and she ends up an alcoholic, and she goes to this cabin that they used to go to, and she's kind of just stuck there. And it has a little bit of rear windowy vibes because she's looking at the people across the lake and through their window. And it's definitely horror. It took a turn I didn't expect. I wasn't upset about it. I just was like, huh. So I don't know that it's his best work, but I enjoyed it. I was glad I got it. And then Upgrade by Blake Crouch, which was my standalone, standout favorite book of 2022. Sci-fi. Blake Crouch does sci-fi better than most people I know, and he keeps you going. And it's about a man who starts to experience some changes in his brain and his body, and he's trying to figure out what's happening, and it links to some people from his past, and he's still kind of just trying to figure it out, and there's kind of this race to do something, and it's just I couldn't put it down. 5 fantastic stars. In August, I picked up a new author to me. I don't know if this is his debut. I don't think so. But this is The Devil Takes You Home by Gabino Iglesias. This one also has a translation book that goes with it. I think one of my grandkids got some kind of book on it. It is a beautiful cover, I think, and it's unique. It is billed as horror, but it does have kind of a thriller synopsis to it. So it follows a man named Mario, whose son is ill, and the mounting medical bills cause him to take a position as a hitman to make ends meet. And he decides to take on one last hit after, just his life is just like in ruins. He says, I'm going to do one more thing. And he ends up with this hit for a man in the mafia. And he's either going to be killed or make $200,000. Those are the choices. But I think because it's billed as horror, this is definitely more than a thriller, although it definitely sounds like the thrillery plot. So he ends up with some other men, I think, or another man that's partnered with him. 3 complicated men travel through the endless Texas landscape. One thing is certain, even if Mario makes it out alive, he'll return a different man. And they say if you like Stephen Graham Jones, Sylvia Moreno Garcia, who I do love, and S.A. Cosby, who I'm reading now, I think you'll like this. So it's very intriguing to me. September's box was my birthday month, so I got a free book in September, and then I did an add-on too. So I got Recursion by Blake Crouch, which I've already read, but I didn't own it. So I got that as my free book. I also got Daisy Darker by Alice Feeney, which was one of my standouts for 2022 as well. I haven't given that a star rating yet. I'm not sure. It was interesting. I'm not sure why, but it follows a woman who visits her grandmother for the holidays. Her family returns to visit her grandmother. I think it's also her grandmother's birthday. They're on this like weird island, and they are kind of isolated. And when the tide comes in, they can't leave. And they're familiar with this. This has happened before. So it's an isolated, closed circle family thriller. And some weird things start happening, and I feel like it's a 5-star read for me because it had a really super surprising ending that I thought was very well done. I was really happy with that. So those 2, and then this one, Other Birds by Sarah Addison Allen. This is a an author that I like. I have read a number of books by Sarah Addison Allen over the years. She always has kind of a nature theme to it. I read one that was set on this like resort lake house, I think, and one that was in an orchard, apple orchard, I think. And so I've read a couple of hers. They're always kind of set in an outdoor, naturey kind of theme. This one is no exception. Small coastal town of Mallow Island, South Carolina, an apartment complex called the Delawisp, which is named after these turquoise birds that are called the Delawisp birds. And she, Zoe, comes to claim and sort through her deceased mother's apartment. She meets the community there. They're usually set in a like kind of a family setting or a community setting, her novels. And then one of her neighbors mysteriously dies. And so this is a pretty short one. I'd like to get to this one sooner than later because I enjoy Sarah Addison Allen. She's a great storyteller. She creates unique characters and unique storylines, and you just kind of get immersed in them, which I really appreciate. Skipped October and November because we were just moving and I didn't find anything that I really had to have. And so then in December, I made up for it by getting 3 books. So one of them was free. You always get a free book in December as well as on your birthday month. And then the other 2 were selections that I thought were very interesting to me. So Kiss Her Once for Me by Alison Cockrum. I had all intentions of reading before the end of the year. The only reason I didn't was because I was trying to get that debut in to get that book of the month challenge, and this is not a debut. So now I don't know if I'll read it before next Christmas or not. We'll see. I might read Christmas in July or something, but new author to me. This follows a woman who she had a job in animation. She really enjoyed her job. She was living in somewhere. She was in Portland and she moves. I'm not sure where. And she ends up picking up a job at a coffee shop. And the landlord of the coffee shop makes her an offer to marry him so that he can get an inheritance. I'm not sure how that's connected to being married. And then she can kind of have some ease with her financial woes after she lost her dream job. And they end up going on a trip to a cabin, I think, for Christmas. Yeah, a family cabin. And he introduces her to his sister. And there's a connection between her and the sister that he doesn't know about. So that is interesting. So I think this must be LGBT queer love story. It is. Her debut novel was The Charm Offensive. She also does live outside Portland, so it's probably an area that she's very good at writing about. But I do want to read this. I just could not get it in before Christmas. So it sounds like fun, though. New author to me for sure. Then The Light Pirate by Lily Brooks Dalton. I talked about this one in my holiday gift guide books that I really was interested in. And I mentioned then that I had this on the way, I think, or I had just gotten it. The Light Pirate is set in Florida, a place I lived in for a time. And it is a family who has 2 boys, and they are preparing for a hurricane named Hurricane Wanda. The mom is pregnant with their 3rd child. So the dad is trying to prepare for the hurricane. I know all too well what that feels like. And the mom is in very extensive or a very advanced stage of pregnancy. And the boys are like running around crazy. And she ends up going into labor. And she gives birth to a girl that they name Wanda. And Wanda is very different. She's very unique. I don't want to know why. Doesn't say. She's just odd. And this book is set in 4 parts that are power, water, light, and time. So it's a very unique way of writing. It's a very unique story, and it sounds fantastic. And look at this cover with this woman with this storm raging and the wind blowing and maybe water blowing and are coming toward her, and yeah, the sky and just it just is uniquely inviting to me. So I want to see how soon I can get that read. The last one that I got was my free book, which was the book of the year or book of the month. Readers vote each year about their favorite. This was not a selection I chose the month that it was offered, but of course, I'm not going to turn down a free book. And this is an author that I have read before, and she wrote one of my favorite books of all time. So you would think that I would have picked this up, but I didn't. It is Tomorrow and Tomorrow and Tomorrow by Gabrielle Zevin. Gabrielle Zevin wrote The Storied Life of A.J. Fikry. I can't tell you how much I love that book. I don't own it, surprisingly. I do need to pick it up one of these days. I did buy it for my daughter for Christmas one year because I loved it so much. It's ironic that I'm getting over a cold because I read The Storied Life of A.J. Fikry toward the end of the year, not at this point of the year, but toward the end of the year, probably November. I was sick. I was homesick, and I read that book in one day. I feel like I could not put it down. It was and remains one of my favorites ever. So why didn't I pick this up? Because I wasn't sure that I wanted to read a story about gaming. And I think it is a story about gaming, but this follows Sam Masser, who leaves a subway car and sees someone that he knew from his past, Sadie Green, and he calls her name. And for a second, she says, I don't know that I want to turn around. But she does, and they reconnect and they collaborate on a game that will, I think it's a game that will create stardom for them. Yeah. If all of the people who read this on Book of the Month voted this the best book of the year, and other people also have rated this very highly because I have seen it featured in a number of places and on BookTube and different bookstores, booksellers, I'm going to give it a shot. So I love Gabrielle Zevin once before. I suspect I will love her again. And this was my last and final selection. I do love this cover though, too. I mean, who could not love that cover? Water, mountain, just everything. Yeah, just so much fun. So that was my haul. A good part of my haul for 2022 was Book of the Month. Like I said, I did my shopping for books last year was lower than ever before, probably, or it feels like it was. Maybe not ever before, but in the last few years was definitely lower. And I really feel good about that. And I really feel like it is time for me to get real about my backlist and to really be discerning about what I select from Book of the Month and from other sources. Having said that, though, there will be a January 2023 haul, and it's only the 2nd of January, but there will be a haul. So I will come back and tell you about what I've acquired in January toward the end of the month. But I hope you will weigh in on whether or not you've read any of these books. If you're a Book of the Month subscriber, let me know if you are in the middle of any of these or if you're excited about any of these as well. Let me know if you're intrigued enough by these to take a look at them, because I'm always curious about that. Maybe we'll end up buddy reading together. You never know. Let me know what your favorites were of 2022, regardless of whether they were connected to Book of the Month or not. Again, I hope that you'll subscribe if you're new. I'm excited to be back. And as always, happy reading. Bye.